When Ashley graduated with a degree in education, she knew her world would revolve around children. She didn't realize that the epicenter of that focus on children wouldn't be in a classroom, but in her own living room. Find out how Ashley and her family support the children of their community that need them, and how their community supports them in this episode of Adoption Uncovered. Can you start out just telling me your name and just a little about your family right now?
Okay, my name is Ashley Carroll. I'm married to my husband, Matt. We've been married for 16 years, I think now. We have 4 children. Jeremiah is our oldest. He's 14. And then Daniel will be 13 in March. Levi will be 10 in March. And James is 5.
Nice. So, so you've adopted, right?
Right. Well, our oldest 3 are biological, and then our youngest James is the one that we adopted.
Cool. Can you tell me, just start me out, when did adoption first occur to you that would be something that you'd want to do?
I think really after we had our 3rd child, I'd had 3 C-sections, and we just knew that my body couldn't do that again. And but we felt like we weren't done with our family. Mm-hmm. And my husband also got into social work at that time. And so it kind of opened our eyes to the need a little bit more. We've had friends over the years that have adopted domestically and internationally. And so we just kind of started thinking about it and praying about it. And we really felt like it was something that God was calling us to do, whether we would be able to adopt or not. We chose to go through the foster care system. And so, but we knew going into the foster care system that we would need to be prepared to adopt if it led to that.
So you went through, I don't know what they call it in Florida, MAP training, or your training?
Yes. I think it was formally MAP training. We were licensed through the Florida Baptist Children's Home. Okay. There's kind of 2 licensing agencies in our area of Florida Baptist Children's Home, and then Life Management is the state organization here. Mm-hmm. And so we went through Florida Baptist Children's Home. We had to start, they changed it from MAP classes to, I think it's called like quality parenting or something like that. But yes, it's essentially the same thing.
Cool. And then once you got your MAP training done, and what was your experience? Did you have to wait a long time before you got your first placement?
We started, I think the classes were 6 or 7 weeks, and we went once a week for a couple hours. We started those in February. And so after classes, then we had to go through all the things for a home study. There was some certain little things that we had to change that we didn't have already, like thermometers in our refrigerator. We needed to get a fire extinguisher, just little things like that.
Right.
We had to change the bedrooms around a little bit. We had to post like a evacuation plan for like fire drills. So just little things like that we hadn't done with our kids. I mean, they knew what to do in a fire, but you have to kind of officially put it up to be approved by the state. And so we were licensed in June. So from February to June was our timetable before we got our official license from the state.
Okay. And then once you got your license, how long was it then till you had a placement?
Let's see. I want to say within less than a month. I want to say within a week or 2.
Yeah.
We got a call for a respite placement. So a foster family was going out of town, and so they couldn't bring the child with them. And so they needed us to keep her for the week. And then it ended up about that same time, I think it was the beginning of July. We got a placement, a more permanent placement. And so that we kind of had both of them for the same time. We just had her for the weekend. They were able to find a family member, a parent, I believe. So we only had the one child for the week for respite, and then this little girl for the weekend. And then James was actually our very next placement, which is the son that we adopted. And that was July 16th.
So in those first placements, what's something that really stands out to you? Anything like that? That's a lot to have on you all at once. You're a new foster parent, and then you suddenly get a bunch of kids. Was that challenging, or you just kind of roll with
It
it?
was
Or?
a little bit. I think we were excited about it. The boys were very excited about it, especially since our first two placements were girls. With having three boys, they were excited to have a little girl at the house to play with, and so it was we only had her for a few days, so it just went by so quickly. I remember.
Okay.
It was hard that first night that we got her. We got her late on Friday night, and she was crying and upset. She had just been through a major trauma, and I tried to rock her, and she did not want anything to do with it. And she was just so tired. I just laid her down, and she went right to sleep. It was after midnight at this point. But so.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, do you remember the day that your now son came to you? Like, what was your understanding of what that place was going to be like, and what are your memories of that day?
So he was actually born on July 14th, and we got the phone call, I believe that day or the next day, that a baby had been born. We knew he was a little boy. He had not been named yet when we first got his phone call. He was named by the time we picked him up. So he was born on the 14th. We went down to the hospital and actually were able to pick him up straight from the hospital 2 days later on the 16th when he was released. We were under the impression that there might be some difficulties as far as withdrawals or things like that. But we got him and we brought him home, and he was perfectly fine. He didn't have any issues to begin with from anything from the birth or anything like that. So it was just like when we had brought any of our other three home from the hospital, he was just a normal baby.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. That sounds super smooth. Um, what was your understanding about like the trajectory of that case? Were you expecting to adopt him, or was that like up in the air, or?
It was up in the air. We had a very, very easy case compared to other families that go through foster care.
Mhm.
We never had to do visitation because of the situation with his case, where normally you have biweekly visitations, and we never had to do any of that. So we kind of thought in the beginning there might be a potential for adoption, but we knew that they were still looking for other family members, and they were doing their due diligence to find the other parent and to find, aunts or uncles or grandparents, any way to keep this baby with his biological family. So there was a lot of just, rough nights of just worrying. You get attached to this child and you love them and you want the best for them. And so there was some hard moments for me and for my husband too, that just kind of worried about what would happen. Would he be safe? Would he be cared for? If he did have to go back, how do we prepare our hearts and our kids' hearts to possibly have to say goodbye? But it never worked out that way. Around 9 months, I think so to begin with, their status is reunification. And then about 9 months it switched, and it was still reunification, but they also added adoption on there on his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually adopted him. He was about 18 months old. We adopted him in March. So he was a little over a year when we got to adopt him.
Okay. Now, like, as you were going through that, did you have pretty good success with your social workers with communicating? What were some, or was there like a particular social worker that stood out, like they really were helpful to you, or any that really kind of stood in the way?
Nothing really like that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of turnover in case management and that situation. So, and because we live in Holmes County and his birth was in Bay County, so that's a county away. It's an hour drive actually, difference. But then also because of my husband's job, he couldn't have local people come to our house to do the check-ins because they know him. So we had to outsource to another county, Jackson County, another county over, to send people to us that hadn't worked with my husband. They wouldn't know our family at all. So there's things there because of my husband working in Washington, Holmes County. Mm-hmm. And then now he's actually in Bay County. There's meetings that we've had to have to say, these are the kids that we can take, these are the kids we haven't. Even now, when we get calls, we have to check and make sure that he has not had any involvement whatsoever with any of the families. So
He's a social worker. Is he with foster care or with some other organization or?
Well, he started with Anchorage Children's Home and then ended up with Florida Department of Children and Family. He started out as a caseworker. So after children were removed from the home, they would work through a case plan for reunification, or even sometimes if they weren't removed from a home, sometimes they have family placement or a safety plan in place. And then now he did that for a couple years, and then he moved into investigations. And that's what he's been doing, I don't know, for probably 8 years now.
So that gives you a pretty interesting perspective on all
Yes.
this. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like for your family to be so involved, just with your husband working? What kind of insights have you seen from that perspective that you could tell me about? Like, how does that affect you? Like you said, to begin with, that's kind of one of the things, the need out there was one of the things that really got you started on this path to begin with. So.
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder for my husband because child welfare never goes away. Like it's like he doesn't get a break from it. So if we have, a lot of times it's a sibling set that we'll have, only rarely have we had like one at a time. And so that's difficult for him because he's just so mentally exhausted by the end of the day. And then he comes home and then we have, foster placement for the weekend. It can be difficult because he feels like he's never really getting out of it, and
Right.
He needs that break. And we've been in it for 6 years now. So that does get a little tiring. In the beginning, it was new, so it wasn't as difficult. But as the years have gone by, it is more difficult, just because our kids are older now. And so our time is we don't have as much time as we did when we first started.
Are your kids still pretty welcoming to your new placements when you get them?
They are. They do really good. Of course, there's little fights over toys with the youngest ones. My oldest two are great about helping me like get the kids in the car or drop them off at daycare. We usually have to swap out car seats and bags and all of that stuff. And so they really are helpful on that side of things. And they still, like to play with them and stuff too, to a certain extent, since they're teenagers now. But they are very helpful.
So how do you balance all that with getting them to their activities? And you homeschool also, right?
Right. Yeah, we homeschool. And so it is difficult because I'm mom and teacher. So that takes up a lot of our day, especially now that the kids are getting into middle school and high school. Their course load is a whole lot bigger. A lot of times our placements right now, because we've chosen to just do respite, it's over the weekend. So there's a little more wiggle room there. We don't have, school on the weekend. So that does help. There's a few times we've had placements through the week. Sometimes it's been good. It's been local and the kids could go to daycare, and then I would be able to do school and everything at home with mine. There's been times that we've had kids from other counties. And so, they would miss daycare once or twice, and I would take them once or twice that week because we did it every other day one time. And then sometimes the kids have just been sick when they got here, and so they just stayed home with us, and we just did the best we could.
Right. Are you guys still foster parents, or did you stop doing that then?
We currently still are foster parents. We just do respite or emergency placement.
Okay.
So there's been times that foster families have gone out of town and will, they keep their foster placement while they're out of town. And we've had a couple of those calls where it's the end of the day and they just cannot find a placement at that time. And so the child will come stay for a night. Sometime there was one situation where it was several nights before they found a more permanent placement for them.
From the beginning, Ashley and her family were open to short-term placements. When people think of foster parenting, they often picture families who host children day in and day out for the long term. Families who do respite care are trained in the same classes and with the same rigor as those families you imagine parenting foster children long term. The difference with respite care providers is that they are there to step in to help the long-term foster families. Rules in most states require that a licensed foster parent take care of a foster child if they need care for more than 24 hours. When foster families go out of state for a wedding or a funeral and they weren't able to get permission to take their foster children with them, or a foster family's having a tough time adjusting to a placement and just needs a break for the weekend, a respite provider can care for the child.
So do you personally feel like this is a calling for you then? You mentioned, can you talk a little more about your personal feeling about how meaningful this is for you?
I think so. I think, as believers and believing what God's word said, I feel like it calls us to help others in their times of need. And children are one of the most vulnerable people in our society. And so I feel like, it is something that God's called us to. And I think there'll be seasons of it. I think there's times in our life when we can invest more in it. And then maybe we have to take a break for a little while and then maybe come back to it again later, as our kids get older and move out. I don't feel like that we'll just do it for a short time and then be done. I think, if we take a break here in the next few years, and focus on getting our biological children, we only have a few more years with them, at home. And so investing in them. And then even as they move out of the house, I think it's something that we'll continue to do years down the road.
So you would really encourage other people to also foster as well?
Yes, absolutely. I know the need is great all over the US, but the need is great here. There's lots of children that need a foster home and need a safe place. And I think one thing, you can kind of almost pick what you want. Like if you feel like you would do better with teenagers, then you can say my house is open for teenagers. Or if you feel like you would do better with babies, you can say I would like three and under. And so most of ours we've kind of set the limit of 3 and under, them being younger than our youngest child in our home, just for their safety.
Okay.
And so most of ours have been younger. There's been a couple exceptions where they're a little bit older than our youngest, but they're still younger than our next to youngest type of thing. So I think there's freedom in that, if this age isn't going to work for you and for your family and how your family's set up, even like the beds that you have, things like that. I think that helps some, because then you feel like when you can say yes and when you can say no.
Right. Well, what are some of the harder issues you've dealt with some of the kids that have come in? What have been some of the things, like I know different areas of the country deal with different like core issues, like whether it's poverty or drugs or whatever. Like what have you noticed in the kids that have come your way that have been the issues with that you've had to deal with?
I don't know much about their cases as far as the ones we've had, because it's just respite. I just know a few things. They'll tell you about the child, about their behaviors, if you're willing to take this or not. That's something they kind of tell you up front. Troubles maybe that a foster parent has or hasn't had with behavior, things like that. I definitely think that drugs is huge in this area, so that's a big issue. But as far as like when they've come into our house, most of them are either, I guess, behind for their age. So they may be 3 years old, but they respond and communicate on more of like a 1-year-old level. Their ability to dress themselves or feed themselves or communicate verbally may be quite a bit younger than what their actual age is. So that's one of the main things, is when they come in, you can't expect necessarily, you may be getting a 3-year-old boy, but he may not be developmentally on a 3-year-old level. And then the only other thing that we've dealt with is with one of our placements, just some anger issues. And because he was older, he's able to verbally, yell and scream and be mad a lot easier than, a baby is. So it's harder to figure out, okay, with a baby, they either need to feed or they need a nap or they're wet and they need their diaper changed. When they're 7, 8, 9 years old, it's not always that's making them upset in the moment. And especially when they're only with you for the weekend or for the week. So just trying to be patient through that, giving them space, trying to communicate them to figure out like what do they need in that moment.
Parenting adopted children is different from parenting biological children. This is almost a truism. It doesn't matter if your adopted child looks just like you and came to you at birth. Separating from the womb that carried that child implies they have experienced a certain amount of trauma. For some children, this trauma is very obvious and in your face, while other children keep this in the background and seem to comfortably coexist with it. Whereas sending your biological children to timeout may be a tried and true method to get the behavior you want to see, that method may not have the same effect for your adopted child. Strict boundaries might work for a biological child, but an adopted child is likely to need those boundaries buffered by an added measure of patience.
So your strategy is kind of just to watch and try to see what they need. Like, do you have any tips when you have a kid like that that's like comes in, they're angry? What do you do?
So with the one specifically that we had, first I just kind of remove them from whatever the situation is that's making them mad. If there's other kids in the room that they're getting mad at, kind of remove them from that situation, move them to another room, try to talk to them. But if they are just you seeing red in that moment, and sometimes you just need to like, okay, you just sit in quietly, on the bed or wherever you feel comfortable right now, sit right here and I'll come back in a few minutes and we can talk. I want to give you time to calm down. Just communicate with them. I see you, I hear you that you're frustrated right now, and I want to help you, but I'm going to give you space for a minute and then I'll come back. Knowing that what may have worked for your biological children or your grandchildren or children you've been around before, whether at church or wherever, is not necessarily going to work with these kids because of the different traumas. You have no idea what they've seen or experienced, and then how that trauma is going to affect their behavior.
Right. So what are some like key ways you find yourself having to work with these kids just slightly differently than your own? You say one of them you're saying is being more patient, right?
Right, definitely. Usually, like with your own kids, their cues, what's going to upset them, or if they get along better with a certain sibling, or what they like and dislike. Where a new placement coming in, I try to find out something that they're interested in. Is there a specific superhero that they really love? There was a set of boys that we had one time, and they loved superheroes. They picked up on that real quick. We had superhero toys, and so I knew that's something that they liked. They saw a superhero book, and they wanted to be read to at night. So I would read them that superhero book before they went to bed. So, and then there's other times we've had younger kids, and it was Paw Patrol. So with us having kids already, we had some of that stuff on hand that we could give them to play with or talk to them about, just to make them feel more comfortable, or to redirect them so that they're getting away from whatever is bothering them in this situation, and redirecting their behavior in attention to something else to kind of de-escalate the situation.
A foster family never works alone. It's important for families serving foster children to have support, not just from their social workers, but also from their community and, if possible, from extended family. Ashley and her family are fortunate recipients of all of the above. From meals to childcare to a kind word, Ashley and her family can count on their family, friends, and church for support.
How have your family members and other people around you supported you or worked with you in this? Have they pitched in, or have they been kind of not sure what to do with all these kids coming in and out of your house? How's it worked?
They've all been very supportive. There was one instance when I had a dentist appointment and we happened to get a placement that day, and my family member was already taking my kids to McDonald's while I was at the dentist appointment. I was like, do you mind taking one more kid with you? And they're like, sure, no problem.
Nice.
We've had church family bring us dinner when they knew we were going to have several kids for that night. Just lots of things like that. Through the fostering process and adoption process, they Well, even when we took the classes, they were like, we'll take turns watching your kids so that you can go to these foster classes, that the training that we needed, just lots of ways like that.
So you found like through the system that you fostered through, they have support there that's been really effective for you, or
So we're licensed through the Florida Baptist Children's Home, and
right.
so it's really more of an extension of our church, and so
Okay.
so our churches helps more now. Florida Baptist Children's Home is great. They always are calling and checking before we get the placement, after the placement, you know, how can we help you this week? Do you need anything? They would bring us diapers when we've had placements. They would bring diapers. We didn't have to go to court a lot, fortunately, with James's adoption case, but I know that there's been times that they've gone with other foster families to court in specifically harder cases. And so they always are kind of reaching out to the community of other churches, and the other churches within our area do a lot of donations, like at Christmas time and Easter, and even throughout the year of just donating diapers and wipes, even formula and other things at different times of the year. When we first got James, they an outside organization, a ministry, I can't remember, had just done like a baby shower type thing and had donated a bunch of things for a new baby. And so they brought some of those things over, and they're like, pick whatever you need. There was, you know, blankets and clothes and all kinds of things, diapers, wipes. What do you need right now? And they, you know, had that ready for us.
Cool. So as far as like the future of your family and this and fostering, you see that like as an ongoing thing, but also it sounds like you have amazing support right there in your community. So
yes.
Can you talk a bit about what you hope for the future as far as, you know, your family in fostering and what you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think there'll be, like I said earlier, I think there'll be times where we take a break just because of the dynamics of our family. But I really think it's something that we will continue even as our kids get older and as our kids, you know, move out and start their own families. I think it's something that I would still stick with and do. So my degree is in elementary education, and I taught in the public school system before I stayed home. But even now, after I've, you know, finished homeschooling my kids and they move on, I don't believe I would go back to the public school system. I think I might would get a job somewhere else, but I really think we would, as our kids move out, that opens up room for us to bring more kids in.
If you're talking to like someone else who's let's see, starting out on this journey or thinking about it, what's good advice you would give to them? If they're thinking about doing the training but they're not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage anyone to definitely get the training and at least start in that direction and see what works for your family. Start out small. You know, maybe just one placement, or even do respite for a little while at first. If it's not something where you want to take on a permanent placement, you know, okay, I'll have these kids for a week and then they'll go back to their permanent foster family, and then you can reevaluate, okay, is this something that we could have on a permanent basis? Are we going to be able to take them to school or daycare? Are we going to be able to care for their needs if they need any kind of extra therapies? Because a lot of times therapies come with a lot of these kids. Are we going to be able to take them back and forth to visitation? Things like that. And it's definitely hard. Everybody, I think, thinks that they come in and you just love these children to death, and you do, but you don't always make the same connection with them as you do your biological children. I think it takes time sometimes to make that connection with them. But just communicate well with your spouse about what you can do and what he can do also. Knowing that's a lot of times when we get calls now, and I check with my husband, like first it's, have you had involvement with this case?
Right.
And then he usually his response is, Do you feel like you can do it? Because this is my work schedule this weekend. Maybe he's on call or whatever.
Right.
I'm not gonna be able to help much because I'm on call. Can you handle this weekend more on your own? Do you feel comfortable doing that? And there's been times we've said no because of that, and times we said yes. But definitely, I think it's something. Take the classes, even if you don't follow through. The classes are great classes. The information in them is great to better help you understand if you're involved with children in any way.
And now, I know sounds like you have a lot of support in your area. If there's someone out there and they're like, you know what, I can't really take kids right now, but I want to support the foster parents that I see, or the support the ones there, what's a good way they can either maybe get plugged in, or what the kind of support do you think you'd like to get from people in the community?
So I think you can contact a local agency. You could contact, so if you're in Florida, you could contact Life Management or Florida Baptist Children's Home. If you're in another state or another area of Florida, seek out those agencies, see what they need. A lot of times they can tell you, hey, we need size 5 diapers right now, or we need pull-ups, or we need formula. A lot of times maybe they just need a meal, like bring them a meal. I know even in Florida, there's a support agency. It's called Foster Florida, I believe. And they're opening up chapters all across the state of Florida. There's another one I've recently found on social media, and that she's opening chapters in states all over the US. And that is their sole goal, is to support foster families. In Florida, they call them frontliners. We're on the front line of the battlefield. So how can you be a volunteer to help? Sometimes it's even just watching the kids for a night. Now, obviously there's some rules there with that, but if you could help babysit, or even go with them to the park one day and help keep an eye on the kids. Obviously, if you're a believer in just praying for that family through that time, go, and maybe they need somebody just to go with them and sit in court. I mean, if you've not been in the court system before, or been in the courtroom, it can be intimidating and scary. So sometimes you just need a friend who'll go with you.
Support for foster children can come in many forms. Have you thought about fostering a child, but you weren't sure you were up to the challenge long term? Maybe you would be a good fit for Respite Care. Do you cook? Maybe you can call a local agency and ask them to direct you to a family in need of a homemade dinner. Look around you and see if you have a connection to a foster family in your community that you can support. Whatever your skill, there is likely a way you can use it to make life better for a foster child and their foster family. For more information and other ideas about ways you can help the foster families in your area, check out my website, adoptionuncovered.com. And thank you.